Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It is not a single continuous line, but a sprawling network of earth and stone. A colossal dragon snaking over jagged mountains and across vast deserts. It stands as the largest man-made structure on Earth. For millennia, it was a symbol of power, a desperate line of defense, and a graveyard for countless souls who built it. This is the story of the Great Wall of China, a monument born from fear, forged by empires, and etched into the very soul of a nation. Join us as we journey through time to uncover the secrets, the legends, and the harsh realities of this architectural marvel. Before there was a unified empire, there was blood and division. The land we now call China was a fractured mosaic of rival kingdoms, a cauldron of perpetual conflict known as the Warring States period. From the 5th century to 221 BC, states like Qi, Yan, Wei, and Zhao vied for supremacy, their borders shifting like sand dunes in the wind. In this era of relentless warfare, a new form of defense began to scar the landscape. These were the first walls, the primitive ancestors of the legendary structure to come. They were not, however, part of a single grand design. Instead, they were individual expressions of fear and sovereignty, built by rival states to protect themselves, not only from each other, but also from the growing threat of nomadic horsemen from the northern steppes, such as the Xiongnu. The state of Qi, facing south, built a wall to defend against its southern neighbors. The northern states of Yan, Zhao, and later Qin constructed their own barriers facing the vast open plains to the north. These early fortifications were monuments of raw material and brute force. There was no quarried stone or baked brick. These were walls of the earth itself. Laborers, likely conscripts and peasants, would erect wooden frames and fill them with layers of local soil, gravel, and sometimes vegetation. They would then pound this mixture relentlessly, compacting it into a dense, rock-hard material, a technique known as rammed earth. The resulting structures were formidable for their time, often several meters high and wide enough for sentries. Yet, they were disconnected. A series of earthen ramparts snaking across specific regions, leaving vast gaps between them. They were pragmatic, not poetic, designed to slow down invading armies, to channel raiders into kill zones, and to give defenders a crucial advantage. Each wall was a testament to a king's ambition and a kingdom's desperation, a line drawn in the dirt that declared, "This far and no further." These scattered earthen defenses were the fragmented DNA of a future behemoth, the first whispers of a story that would eventually be told on a continental scale. The chaos of the warring states ended not with a truce, but with a conquest. The state of Qin, under the ruthless and visionary leader Ying Zheng, systematically vanquished its rivals, and by 221 BC, he had forged a new, unified entity, China. Proclaiming himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, he embarked on a radical program of centralization. He standardized currency, weights, measures, and even the written script. But to protect his nascent empire, he needed a standardized defense. The old, competing walls of the former states were now internal, obsolete barriers. Worse, they were symbols of the very division he had fought to erase. The emperor ordered many of these internal walls to be torn down. The northern walls, however, presented an opportunity. He envisioned linking these disparate sections into a single, colossal fortification. that would serve as the definitive northern border of his empire. A clear demarcation between the civilized, agricultural world of the Han Chinese and the barbarian, nomadic tribes of the steppes. This was not a repair job. It was an act of creation on an unprecedented scale. The monumental task was entrusted to his most capable general, Meng Tian. With a workforce rumored to number in the hundreds of thousands, composed of soldiers, convicts, and conscripted peasants, Meng Tian began the colossal project. They didn't just connect the old walls. They reinforced them, expanded them, and built entirely new sections across treacherous terrain, from high mountain ridges to arid plains. The goal was to create an unbroken line of defense, stretching for thousands of miles. This new wall was a powerful symbol of the emperor's authority. It was a declaration of imperial power, a projection of control over the landscape itself. For the first time, the concept of a Great Wall began to take shape, not as a collection of separate defenses, but as a single unified project born from the will of one man. It was a monumental undertaking that would secure his empire, but would be built on a foundation of unimaginable human suffering, cementing his legacy as both a great unifier and a fearsome tyrant. The grand vision of Qin Shi Huang's unified wall was realized through the relentless toil and suffering of its builders. The technology behind its construction was simple, yet brutally effective. The primary method was hengtu, or rammed earth. Workers would construct parallel wooden frames, creating a long, narrow channel. Into this channel, they would pour a thin layer of soil, gravel, and whatever local aggregate was available. Then, the back-breaking work began. Teams of laborers, using heavy wooden or stone pounders, would compact the layer until it was dense and hard. Layer by agonizing layer, the wall would slowly rise from the ground, a testament to organized human effort. This process, repeated millions of times along a vast frontier, created a barrier that was surprisingly durable, capable of withstanding both the elements and the attacks of nomadic raiders. But the true cost of this monument was not measured in earth and wood, but in human lives. The workforce was a cross-section of the empire's underclass. There were soldiers from the imperial army, but the majority were conscripted civilians, plucked from their farms and families, and a vast number of convicts, sentenced to labor on the wall as punishment. Conditions were horrific. They worked under the scorching sun of summer and in the freezing winds of winter. Food was scarce, accidents were common, and disease ran rampant through the makeshift camps. Overseers enforced brutal discipline, pushing the laborers to their limits and beyond. The wall's construction gave rise to a dark legend, earning it the nickname, the longest cemetery on Earth. While historical evidence does not support the gruesome myth of workers being mixed into the wall's core as filler, the reality is no less tragic. Countless thousands perished from exhaustion, starvation, and violence. Their bodies were simply buried in the shadow of the structure they were forced to build. The wall, therefore, was more than a defensive barrier. It was a monument built on a foundation of bone and watered with the tears of a generation. Every meter of its length represented an immense sacrifice, a silent story of the human cost of an emperor's ambition. The Qin Dynasty, for all its power, was short-lived, collapsing soon after the death of its first emperor. It was succeeded by the far more enduring Han Dynasty, which would rule for over 4 centuries. The Han inherited the Qin Wall, a formidable but incomplete legacy. Initially, they pursued a policy of appeasement with the powerful Xiongnu Confederation to the north, using diplomacy and strategic marriages to maintain a fragile peace. However, under the reign of the ambitious Emperor Wu, this passive strategy was abandoned. He was an expansionist who believed in projecting Han power far beyond its traditional borders. This new, aggressive foreign policy demanded a new role for the wall. Emperor Wu launched a series of massive military campaigns that pushed the Xiongnu back and secured the vital Hexi Corridor, a long, narrow passage through the mountains. This corridor was the gateway to the west and the nascent trade routes that would soon become the legendary Silk Road. To protect this invaluable artery of commerce and military supply, the wall had to be extended. The Han embarked on a massive building program, pushing the line of fortification over 1,000 kilometers further west, deep into the unforgiving terrain of the Gobi Desert. The construction here differed from the earlier Qin Wall, adapting to the environment. Where earth was scarce, they used layers of woven reeds and tamarisk branches filled with gravel and sand. The Han Wall was also more sophisticated. It wasn't just a single barrier, but an integrated defense system. They constructed a dense network of watchtowers, beacons, and forts. These towers, placed within sight of one another, formed a rapid communication system. A plume of smoke by day or a blazing fire by night could relay messages of an impending attack across hundreds of miles in just a few hours. The wall was no longer merely a static line of defense. It had become the backbone of imperial expansion, a tool for controlling territory, protecting trade, and projecting the might of the Han Dynasty into the very heart of Central Asia. With the dawn of the Han Dynasty, the Great Wall entered a new phase of its existence, transforming from a purely defensive barrier into a vital artery for commerce and imperial expansion. Under the ambitious Emperor Wu, who reigned from 141 to 87 BC, China looked westward with an insatiable curiosity and a desire for control. The legendary Silk Road, a network of trade routes connecting the east and west, was not a naturally safe passage. It snaked through treacherous deserts and mountains, territories roamed by bandits and hostile tribes. To secure this lifeline of wealth and information, Emperor Wu initiated one of the most significant extensions of the Great Wall in its history. This new frontier was the Hexi Corridor, a narrow strip of oasis-rich land in modern-day Gansu province, squeezed between the Tibetan Plateau and the Gobi Desert. For over 1,000 kilometers, Han engineers and laborers pushed the wall westward, deep into the unforgiving wilderness. The construction methods here were a testament to human ingenuity in the face of harsh environments. Lacking the earth and stone of the eastern plains, builders used what the desert provided. They created a durable composite material by tamping down layers of gravel, sand, and clay between wooden frames. In more arid regions, they wove immense mats from local reeds and tamarisk branches, laying them in alternating layers with sand and gravel. These sections, remarkably, still stand in places today, bleached by 2 millennia of sun. But this western extension was more than just a wall. It was a sophisticated system of control. Forts, garrisons, and watchtowers were built at strategic intervals, most famously at the Jade Gate, or Yumenguan, the fabled entry point into China for weary caravans. Soldiers stationed here were not just warriors. They were administrators, farmers, and customs officials. They patrolled the trade routes, protected merchants, maintained supplies, and used a complex system of smoke signals by day and fire by night to communicate along the line. The wall, in this context, became the guardian of the Silk Road, a symbol of Han power that guaranteed the safe passage of silk, jade, and spices westward, and the flow of horses, gold, and new ideas eastward. It was the backbone of an empire's global ambition. The Great Wall was not built against a phantom menace. It was a direct, monumental response to a formidable and persistent adversary, the Xiongnu. This powerful confederation of nomadic tribes from the Mongolian steppe was the defining external threat to the Han Dynasty. The Xiongnu were a mirror image of the settled, agricultural Chinese society to their south. They were master horsemen, practically born in the saddle, and their warriors were expert archers, capable of firing with deadly accuracy while galloping at full speed. Their entire society was mobile, following their herds of horses, sheep, and cattle across the vast grasslands. This mobility was their greatest military asset, allowing them to conduct lightning-fast raids deep into Chinese territory, plundering grain, silk, and other resources, before melting back into the steppe where the Chinese infantry-based armies could not effectively follow. The conflict was a fundamental clash of civilizations. The Han sought stability, order, and taxable farmland, while the Xiongnu thrived on mobility and the acquisition of goods they could not produce themselves. The wall was the Han's primary answer to this challenge. It was designed to be a buffer, a demarcation line between the settled and the nomadic worlds. Its watchtowers provided early warnings of raids, and its ramparts were intended to stop or at least slow down the swift Xiongnu cavalry, giving Han forces time to mobilize. However, the wall was never a perfect solution. It was immensely expensive to garrison and maintain, and the Xiongnu could often find ways to bypass it or bribe corrupt officials to look the other way. Recognizing the wall's limitations, the Han employed a multi-pronged strategy. This included a diplomatic policy known as Heqin, or peace through kinship, where Chinese princesses were married to Xiongnu leaders and vast quantities of silk, grain, and wine were sent as tribute. When diplomacy failed, Emperor Wu launched massive offensive campaigns, sending armies of over 100,000 soldiers deep into Xiongnu territory to destroy their power base. The struggle was a centuries-long saga of raids and counter-raids, treaties made and broken. It shaped China's military, its economy, and its very identity, with the Great Wall standing as the silent, enduring testament to this epic rivalry. Empires, like the walls they build, are subject to the erosive forces of time and internal decay. After 4 centuries of relative stability and power, the Han Dynasty finally crumbled in 220 AD, plunging China into a prolonged period of fragmentation and conflict that would last for nearly 400 years. This epoch, known variously as the Three Kingdoms, the Qin Dynasty, and the Northern and Southern dynasties, was an age of civil war, shifting allegiances, and social upheaval. In this chaotic environment, the grand, unified concept of the Great Wall ceased to exist. With no strong central government to fund its maintenance or man its garrisons, the colossal structure was abandoned to the elements. The great rammed earth ramparts of the Han era began to erode under the wind and rain. Watchtowers crumbled, their timbers looted for firewood by local peasants. The strategic forts that once guarded the Silk Road fell into ruin, becoming little more than ghost towns on the desolate frontier. The very idea of a clear boundary between China and the barbarians dissolved. As central authority weakened, the northern frontier became porous. Various nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples, such as the Xianbei, the Ji, and the Qiang, migrated south. Some came to serve as mercenaries for the warring Chinese factions, while others came as conquerors, establishing their own dynasties across northern China. The world became a complex tapestry of intermingling cultures and constant warfare. The focus of the era's rulers was not on defending against external threats, but on surviving internal ones. Power was localized, and while a local warlord, or the ruler of a short-lived kingdom, might repair a small section of an old wall for their own immediate defense, there was no overarching strategy, no grand vision. The wall was no longer a continuous shield protecting a unified civilization. Instead, its decaying segments became quarries for building materials, landmarks in a fractured landscape, and potent symbols of a lost golden age of unity and strength. For centuries, the dragon slept, its stone and earth scales slowly returning to the dust from which they were raised, waiting for an iron-willed ruler to awaken it once more. After nearly 4 centuries of division, China was forcefully reunified in 581 AD by the formidable and ruthless Sui dynasty. The Sui emperors, driven by a vision to restore the glory of the Han, embarked on a series of monumental construction projects to consolidate their power and physically stitch the fractured nation back together. They built the Grand Canal, a marvel of engineering connecting the north and south, and they turned their attention to the northern frontier, where the Great Wall lay in ruins. A new nomadic power, the Gokturks, had risen on the steppes, and the Sui saw the immediate need to re-establish a formidable defensive line. The Sui reconstruction of the Great Wall was an undertaking of breathtaking scale and brutal efficiency. Emperor Wen, the dynasty's founder, and his successor, Emperor Yang, were not merely repairing the old Han walls. They were creating a new, stronger barrier. Historical records, though perhaps exaggerated, speak of immense labor forces being conscripted for the work. Millions of people, including commoners, soldiers, and convicts, were mobilized. The human cost was staggering. Laboring in harsh conditions with inadequate supplies, countless workers perished from exhaustion, disease, and accidents, their bodies rumored to be interred within the wall itself, adding a grim new layer to its legacy. Unlike the Han walls, which were primarily rammed earth, the Sui incorporated more stone and brick where available, building a more durable and imposing structure. The project stretched across the northern plains, linking older fortifications and establishing a new frontier. The strategic purpose was twofold. First, to provide a tangible defense against Gokturk raids, and second, to serve as a powerful symbol of the Sui dynasty's absolute authority and its ability to command the resources of a reunified China. It was a declaration in stone and earth that the era of division was over. Yet, this grand ambition came at a price. The immense cost of building the wall, coupled with the expense of the Grand Canal and a series of disastrous military campaigns against a Korean kingdom, bled the empire dry and fostered deep resentment among the populace. The very projects designed to eternalize the Sui dynasty would ultimately contribute to its shockingly swift collapse after only 37 years, proving that an empire's foundation rests not only on its walls, but on the well-being of its people. The mid-1850s saw the British Empire, under Victoria's watchful eye, plunge into the brutal quagmire of the Crimean War. This was not a distant colonial skirmish. It was a modern, industrial-scale conflict against a major European power, Russia, and it shocked the nation to its core. The Queen, far from being a detached sovereign, was deeply and personally invested. She followed the dispatches from the front with feverish anxiety, her letters to her ministers filled with pointed questions and fervent hopes for the welfare of her soldiers. The reports from journalist William Howard Russell, detailing the horrific conditions, the bureaucratic incompetence, and the sheer bravery of the common soldier, moved her profoundly. These were not just numbers on a casualty list. They were her subjects, her men, suffering terribly from cholera, frostbite, and neglect, as much as from Russian bullets. This conflict marked a turning point in Victoria's public persona. She and Prince Albert championed reforms, but her most significant contribution was one of profound empathy. She knitted scarves and mittens for the troops, visited wounded soldiers returning to Chatham, and listened, truly listened, to their harrowing stories. This was a new kind of monarchy, one that demonstrated a maternal concern for its people. Her most revolutionary act was the institution of a new military decoration, one that would be awarded for valor alone, irrespective of rank. It was to be a simple bronze cross cast from captured Russian cannons, and it would be named after her, the Victoria Cross. In personally pinning the medals on the chests of grizzled veterans, she shattered ancient protocols, creating an unbreakable bond between the crown and its armed forces. The war was a bloody, costly affair, but it solidified Victoria's image as the mother of her nation and the ultimate guardian of its martial pride. In 1857, a firestorm erupted in the heart of the British Empire's most prized possession. The Indian Mutiny, or as it is known in India, the First War of Independence, was a cataclysm that shook the foundations of British rule. What began with sepoy soldiers rebelling over rifle cartridges greased with animal fat, offensive to both Hindu and Muslim beliefs, spiraled into a widespread and savage conflict. For Queen Victoria, thousands of miles away, the news was a source of unimaginable horror and personal grief. The initial reports were filled with sensationalized, gruesome accounts of massacres of British civilians, women, and children, which fueled a furious, vengeful public outcry in Britain. Victoria's letters from this period reveal a mind torn between imperial fury and a deep sense of betrayal. She saw the mutiny not as a political uprising, but as a personal affront, a wicked rebellion by ungrateful subjects. She urged swift and decisive action to crush the rebellion, reflecting the dominant mood of her country. However, as the rebellion was brutally suppressed and stories of equally horrific British reprisals emerged, a more nuanced view began to form in the Queen's mind, heavily influenced by Prince Albert. She resisted the most extreme calls for collective punishment against the Indian population. When the dust settled, the British government dissolved the East India Company, which had governed India for a century, and brought the subcontinent under direct crown rule. In her 1858 proclamation, Victoria was styled as the ruler of India, promising religious freedom and equal protection under the law. It was a document that, while born from violence, sought to establish a new, more direct relationship between the monarch and her Indian subjects, culminating years later in her being named Empress of India, a title that forever linked her name to the fate of the subcontinent. December 14th, 1861. It is a date that cleaved Queen Victoria's life in two. Before it, there was color, duty, love, and partnership. After it, there was only black. Prince Albert, her anchor, her mentor, her dear angel, was dead at the age of 42. He had been unwell for weeks, but the diagnosis of typhoid fever came too late. His death, in the Blue Room at Windsor Castle, was not merely the loss of a husband. It was the collapse of Victoria's entire world. Albert had been more than a consort. He was the Shadow King, the driving force behind the throne, her chief advisor, and the architect of her reign. He managed the royal households, guided her through political crises, championed the arts and sciences, and fathered her 9 children. He was, in her own words, her life, her support, her all. Without him, she was utterly lost. The nation was plunged into a state of shock, but for Victoria, the grief was a physical, all-consuming force. It was a sorrow so profound, so monumental, that it would define the remaining 4 decades of her life and reign. She immediately retreated from the world, swapping her royal gowns for the stark, simple black of a widow, a uniform she would never relinquish. She ordered the household to be maintained exactly as it was when Albert was alive. Each evening his clothes were laid out, hot water was brought to his empty room for his shave, and his chamber pot was changed. This was not just mourning. It was a desperate, pathological attempt to keep his spirit alive, to deny the finality of death. The vibrant, engaged queen was gone, replaced by a spectral figure shrouded in crape, a recluse haunting the halls of Windsor and Osborne House. The British public, initially sympathetic, would soon grow restless with their absent monarch. But Victoria was deaf to their calls. The light of her life had been extinguished, and she had willingly stepped into the shadows with him, leaving an entire empire waiting in the dark. In the suffocating aftermath of Albert's death, Queen Victoria's grief became a prison. She fled London, the site of so many happy memories, for the isolation of Osborne House, and more importantly, the remote solitude of Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands. It was here, amidst the misty lochs and rugged mountains that Albert had so adored, that a new and controversial figure entered her life. John Brown. He was a plain-speaking, hard-drinking Highlander, a gillie, or outdoor servant who had worked for Albert. In the stifling, formal world of the royal court, Brown was a gust of raw, unfiltered air. He treated the queen not as a monarch, but as a woman in pain. He was brutally honest, often foregoing royal protocol entirely, calling her woman and ordering her about for her own good. To the horrified courtiers, this was an unforgivable insolence. To the grieving Victoria, it was a lifeline. Brown encouraged her to ride her pony, to take fresh air, to engage with the world outside her darkened rooms. He became her constant companion, her protector, and her most trusted confidant. He was the only one who could coax a smile from her, the only one who dared to challenge her morbid seclusion. This intensely close and to outsiders deeply inappropriate relationship immediately sparked scandalous rumors. Was this coarse servant the queen's lover? Was he a medium, channeling the spirit of Prince Albert? The court whispered. The press printed veiled insinuations, and her own children grew deeply resentful of his influence. They called him the Queen's Stallion. While the true nature of their relationship remains one of history's most tantalizing secrets, his role is undeniable. John Brown broke through the paralysis of Victoria's grief when no one else could. He helped the widow of Windsor begin the long, slow process of re-engaging with her duties, reminding the woman who had forgotten how to live that she was still a queen. The year 1861 did not just mark the end of a life, it shattered a world. When Prince Albert succumbed to what was likely typhoid fever, the light in Queen Victoria's universe was extinguished. The grief that consumed her was not merely personal. It was a cataclysmic force that would reshape the monarchy and the nation's perception of it for decades. Plunging into a state of perpetual mourning, Victoria abandoned London, the vibrant heart of her empire, for the secluded stone-cold comfort of Windsor Castle, Balmoral, and Osborne House. She became a phantom monarch, a name on documents, but a ghost in the halls of power. Her withdrawal was absolute. She ordered that Albert's rooms in every royal residence be maintained exactly as he had left them, with hot water brought for his morning shave and fresh clothes laid out each evening. This morbid dedication was a testament to a love that transcended death. But to her ministers and the public, it was a terrifying dereliction of duty. The empty throne became a whispered phrase, a symbol of a leaderless empire. Politicians, led by figures like Prime Minister Lord Palmerston, grew increasingly frustrated. They needed their sovereign not just as a figurehead, but as a constitutional arbiter, a steady hand to sign legislation and meet foreign dignitaries. Instead, they communicated with her through letters and intermediaries, her grief forming an impenetrable wall around her. This prolonged seclusion sparked a constitutional crisis and fueled a burgeoning Republican movement. Pamphlets circulated questioning the cost and purpose of a monarchy whose monarch refused to be seen. Her sorrow, once a source of public sympathy, began to curdle into public resentment. She was no longer the beloved young queen, but the reclusive, almost mythical widow of Windsor, a figure draped in black crape and mystery, whose personal tragedy threatened the very stability of the institution she was born to lead. From the depths of Victoria's despair, an unlikely figure emerged, a man who would breach the walls of royal protocol and become the Queen's most trusted and most controversial companion. His name was John Brown, a plain-speaking, hard-drinking Scottish gillie from her beloved Balmoral estate. He had been a favorite of Prince Albert, known for his rugged competence and loyalty. In the years following Albert's death, as Victoria remained entombed in her grief, Brown was brought south to serve her. He was unlike anyone at court. He showed no deference, addressing the queen of the world's largest empire with a bluntness that would have seen any courtier dismissed. He called her woman and ordered her about for her own good, coaxing her out of her dark rooms and onto her pony for fresh air. This radical familiarity was precisely what the grieving monarch needed. While her ministers and children tiptoed around her sorrow, Brown treated her not as a fragile icon, but as a person in need of grounding. He became her confidant, her protector, and her closest friend. He managed her security, her stables, and increasingly, her daily life. This unprecedented intimacy, however, set the court ablaze with scandalous rumors. The Queen and her Highland servant were inseparable. Whispers of a secret marriage circulated, earning her the derogatory nickname Mrs. Brown. Her own children resented his influence, viewing him as an insolent upstart who held a mysterious power over their mother. The press published cartoons, and the political establishment was aghast at the influence wielded by a commoner. Yet Victoria remained fiercely loyal, deaf to the gossip and criticism. In John Brown, she found not a replacement for Albert, but a conduit back to the world, a rugged anchor in the storm of her grief. Their relationship remains one of the great secrets of her reign, a testament to her willingness to defy every convention for the sake of a human connection that, for a time, saved her from herself. While John Brown coaxed the woman out of mourning, it took a politician of extraordinary cunning and charm to lure the queen back to her throne. That man was Benjamin Disraeli. A novelist turned statesman, Disraeli understood something his political rivals, particularly the stern and formal William Gladstone, never could. Queen Victoria was not just a constitutional monarch. She was a woman who responded to flattery, imagination, and a grand vision of empire. When Disraeli became prime minister, he embarked on a campaign to win her favor. He approached her not with dry policy papers and tedious obligations, but with wit, deference, and a shower of enchanting letters. He famously said, "Everyone likes flattery, and when you come to royalty, you should lay it on with a trowel." He referred to Victoria as the fairy, a magical, otherworldly being, and treated her as the imperial matriarch she longed to be. This was a stark contrast to Gladstone, whom she found cold and preachy, once complaining that he addressed her as if she were a public meeting. Disraeli, however, spoke to her of grand destinies, of Britain's role on the world stage, and of her central place within it. He involved her deeply in his political machinations, most notably his audacious purchase of shares in the Suez Canal, presenting it as a personal triumph for her and the empire. He consulted her, confided in her, and made her feel for the first time since Albert's death that she was not just a symbol, but a vital and respected political partner. Their relationship was a fusion of personal affection and political strategy. He brought her primroses from his garden. She sent him heartfelt letters of support. Through his masterful handling, Victoria re-engaged with her public duties, her confidence restored. She was no longer just the widow of Windsor. She was the active sovereign of a global empire, guided and glorified by her favorite minister. Benjamin Disraeli's greatest gift to his fairy queen was a title that would forever define the apex of her reign and the zenith of British imperial ambition. In 1876, through the controversial Royal Titles Act, he orchestrated the proclamation of Queen Victoria as Empress of India. This was more than a mere change in nomenclature. It was a profound political statement. For Disraeli, it was a strategic masterstroke. It formally bound the Indian subcontinent, the jewel in the crown of the empire, directly to the British monarch, bypassing the complex history of the East India Company. It was also a geopolitical chess move, designed to counter the growing influence of Russia in Central Asia and to elevate the British monarch to the same imperial status as the Tsars of Russia and the Kaisers of Germany. For Victoria, the title was deeply personal. It resonated with her romantic, almost mystical conception of empire. She was fascinated by India, commissioning portraits of her Indian subjects and employing Indian servants, or munshis, in her household. To be empress, or Kaiser-i-Hind, was to become the great mother figure to hundreds of millions of new subjects, a role she embraced with immense pride. The proclamation was met with a mixture of celebration and criticism back in Britain. Liberals, led by her nemesis Gladstone, argued that the title was un-English, theatrical, and smacked of Oriental despotism. But for the majority, it was a moment of immense national pride, a concrete symbol of Britain's global dominance. Grand ceremonies, known as durbars, were held in Delhi to proclaim the new title to the Indian princes and populace. Victoria herself never visited India, but the title brought the subcontinent into her personal domain. It cemented her image as the matriarch of a multi-ethnic, world-spanning empire, a living embodiment of Britain's imperial destiny, and a secret she cherished above all other crowns. The Victorian imagination, fueled by the relentless expansion of Queen Victoria's empire, was a fertile ground for myths about distant lands. As British ships forced open the ports of Qing China, the Great Wall stood not just as a physical structure, but as a monumental symbol of an ancient, enigmatic, and seemingly impenetrable civilization. It was an object of intense fascination, its true nature shrouded in rumor and exaggeration. The seeds of the modern myth that the wall is visible from space were sown in this era of imperial curiosity and limited information. Long before space travel, Victorian writers and adventurers grappled with the wall's immense scale, attempting to convey its grandeur to a public hungry for tales of the exotic. In 1893, the magazine The Century published an article that speculated on the wall's visibility from the moon, a fantastical notion that captured the public's imagination and demonstrated how the structure had already transcended its physical reality to become a legend. This myth-making was intrinsically linked to the imperial mindset. To the Victorians, who measured their own power in miles of territory and numbers of subjects, the wall was a rival wonder of the world, a testament to a different kind of imperial power, one of endurance and isolation, rather than maritime dominance. Explorers like William Edgar Gyle, who began his extensive travels along the wall near the end of Victoria's reign, sought to map and understand it, to bring it within the rational scientific framework of the West. Yet, their accounts often amplified its mystique, describing an endless, serpentine dragon of stone stretching over a fantastical landscape. This process of mythologizing was a way of comprehending, and perhaps containing, a culture that challenged European notions of supremacy. The wall was too vast, too ancient to ignore. It had to be transformed into a story, a legend that could be told and understood back in London, a safe distance from the complex realities of the empire Victoria ruled. While the myth of the Great Wall grew in the West, its physical reality during Queen Victoria's reign was one of profound neglect and decay. The Qing Dynasty, beset by internal rebellion and external aggression, had neither the resources nor the strategic need to maintain the vast structure. For the British soldiers and diplomats who marched towards Beijing during the Second Opium War in 1860, the sections of the wall they encountered were not a formidable barrier, but a melancholy ruin. This image of a crumbling dragon became a powerful metaphor in the Victorian mind, perfectly aligning with their perception of China itself, a once mighty empire, now stagnant and decaying, its past glories turning to dust. This physical evidence of decline served as a potent justification for British imperialism. The crumbling ramparts and weed-choked watchtowers were seen as proof of China's inability to govern itself and adapt to the modern world, a world being aggressively shaped by Victoria's industrial and military might. To a British officer standing on a dilapidated section of the wall, looking out over the Chinese countryside, The contrast would have been stark. He represented an empire of steam, steel, and global ambition, while the wall represented a static, inward-looking past. The destruction was not malicious, but born of indifference. Local villagers quarried its stones for their homes and farms, and nature slowly reclaimed the ancient masonry. There were no grand preservation efforts. In the eyes of the West, the wall's decay mirrored the Qing court's perceived weakness and inability to resist foreign demands. This narrative of a decrepit civilization, symbolized by its greatest monument falling into ruin, was incredibly convenient. It helped frame the Opium Wars not as acts of aggression for economic gain, but as a necessary, almost benevolent intervention to awaken a sleeping giant from its self-imposed slumber, a key secret of the imperial project during Queen Victoria's time. The relentless pressure of Western imperialism during the latter half of Queen Victoria's reign inadvertently sparked the transformation of the Great Wall's meaning. As the Qing dynasty weakened under the weight of unequal treaties and foreign interventions, Chinese intellectuals and reformers began searching for symbols to galvanize a new sense of national identity. The wall, once a monument to a dynasty's power and later a sign of its decay, was reborn as a potent symbol of the Chinese nation itself, a representation of its long history, its inherent strength, and its resilience in the face of foreign encroachment. It became a silent testament to a spirit of resistance against powers like Great Britain. This transformation was accelerated by a new Victorian technology: photography. As Western travelers, diplomats, and adventurers gained more access to China's interior, they brought their cameras with them. Photographers like the Scot John Thomson captured hauntingly beautiful images of the wall in the 1870s, his glass plate negatives revealing its majestic scale and rugged beauty to a global audience. These images, reproduced in books and magazines in London, Paris, and New York, stripped the wall of its immediate military context and recast it as a sublime, romantic ruin, an essential landmark for the intrepid Victorian tourist. It was no longer just a barrier, it was a destination. The wall's image became an icon, disseminated across the world, solidifying its status as the ultimate symbol of China. This process was deeply ironic. The very forces that were undermining China's sovereignty were also responsible for broadcasting the image of its most powerful national symbol to the world. The wall began to represent a China that existed beyond the control of the Qing court, a deeper, more enduring entity that the imperial powers could trade with and fight against, but never truly conquer, a hidden strength within the secrets of the empire Queen Victoria engaged with. By the time of Queen Victoria's death in 1901, the world, and China's place in it, had been irrevocably altered. The Great Wall stood as a silent witness to this century of tumultuous change, its legacy forever entwined with the age of empire. The Victorian encounter with China, a complex dance of trade, diplomacy, and warfare, had shattered the nation's isolationist past, a past the wall itself symbolized. The enduring legacy of this period is twofold. On one hand, the wall became a symbol of everything the British Empire defined itself against. It was seen as static, defensive, and backward-looking, a monument to an isolationism that the dynamic, seafaring empire believed was unnatural and immoral. The opening of China was, from this perspective, a historical necessity, bringing a closed society into the global family of nations, albeit by force. On the other hand, the wall's legacy was one of inspiration. For the Chinese people, it evolved into the ultimate emblem of sovereignty and perseverance. It was a reminder that their civilization had endured for millennia and could withstand the century of humiliation inflicted by foreign powers, including Britain. Its sheer scale and persistence on the landscape offered a powerful counter-narrative to the Victorian story of Chinese decay. Today, as millions of tourists walk its ramparts, its legacy continues to echo this complex history. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a treasure for all humanity, but it is also an indelible symbol of Chinese national pride. This journey from a mysterious barrier in the Victorian imagination to a crumbling ruin justifying imperial ambition to a global icon of cultural heritage charts the profound and often painful relationship between China and the West, a relationship forged in the crucible of Queen Victoria's empire. The endless wall endures, its stones holding the secrets of empires that rise and fall.